Evening. Hello. Welcome to the fourth Intergalactic MK Geek Night. We're really pleased so many of you have been able to join us for this a sustainability special. March 2020 was the last Geek Night to happen in real life. And I don't know about you, but that feels like such a long time ago. We're really looking forward to when we can meet you all again in person. But for this event, we're embracing the virtual once more with one of our speakers actually joining us all the way from New Zealand. So over on the YouTube stream where you are, you'll see that there's a live chat facility over there, depending on how you're looking at it. Please use this chat and talk to each other, as we always do, and the community is such a big part of Geek Night. And then if you have any questions to the speakers, ask the questions in chat, we'll collect them, and then at the end we have the Q&A and we'll put those questions to the speakers. So one last thing before we kick off, a huge thanks to our amazing partners. Protospace, who are obviously a new supporter, kind of a partner that Geek Night's linked to, but they've been able to make this a free event, so thank you. Guru, who are awesome and have supported us for so long, absolutely love the guys at Guru. Silverstone Technology Park, again, as well, long-time supporters, supporting us for every event this year, which is amazing. We have Pim joining us from Silverstone later. Pixel Creation, who make everything we do look lovely. And then Tito, who are our ticket partner. And so the tickets that you book will be through Tito. So on to our first speaker of the night. So first speaker is Natalia Vanacek, and she is a web developer building hybrid mobile apps and websites in Elixir, and she has a passion for the environment. She's recently started an environmental science degree and is hoping to combine her knowledge of technology and the living world to advocate for climate change. And tonight, Natalia is talking to us about working towards a greener world from behind the keyboard. Over to you, Natalia.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me. I am going to share my screen now. Hope you can see it okay. Can you give me a thumb up if it's okay? Cool, thanks. Right, thanks everyone for having me. I feel really grateful to be here today amongst this amazing lineup. My name is Natalia. I'm an environmentalist by night and a web developer by day. I currently work for a Plymouth-based agency called Elixir. I'm also a first year environmental science student, and I'm hoping to combine my knowledge of technology and the living world to advocate for climate change. I also volunteer for Climate Action Tech, which is a global community of tech professionals who use skills, expertise, and platforms to support solutions for the climate crisis. But why am I here today? Well, for some time now, I've been, trying to figure out what I can do to battle climate change. I made a lot of changes in my personal life, using green energy providers, eating vegan, buying locally grown fruit and veg, minimizing contribution to fast fashion and consumerism, voting for environmentally centered policy, signing petitions, etc., etc. But all of that is great, but at the end of the day, we need big changes. We need green policies. We need government organizations around the globe to do their part, as systematic change is the way forward. So today I'm going to share some ideas that pretty much everyone can take with them to implement them in the workspace. About 2.5 years ago, I believe, I had this epiphany that, surely I'm affecting the environment through the work that I do and the technologies that I use. At the time, I haven't seen or heard of anyone talk about technology and climate change. So I went on Twitter and I asked for help, as you do. And that's how I learned about OMG Climate, which is an unconference run by Climate Action Tech. So I went to the event and I learned so much during it. I left it feeling inspired and hyped and sad a bit, but somewhat obligated, that, you know, I need to take all of this with me, learn more about technology and climate change, and spread the awareness, because, you know, it is hugely important. By all means, I'm not an expert. I've not written a book. I haven't run any campaigns. I'm just here to share with you what I've learned, and hopefully that'll inspire you to, you know, implement some of those changes so that tech industry becomes more sustainable. Technology is pioneering in new inventions and showcases how brilliant the human mind is. I think the industry as a whole has a huge potential to fight and to end environmental injustice and climate change, but I think it's up to us to do it. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about climate change. I'm going to show you some stats and give you a little overview of where we are with the climate crisis. I'm going to talk about the ways we can reduce carbon footprint through the work that we do and within our workplaces. And at the end, I'm going to show some examples of campaigns that are already happening in this space. This isn't going to be a very technical talk. I'm going to leave that for Tom at the end. Right, so according to the UN, we only have 10 years left to prevent irreversible damage from climate change. And what it really means is that if we don't act now, by now I mean yesterday or years ago, and the global temperatures rise by 1.5 degrees, it will result in more dangerous disruptions to global societies and ecosystems, and that will include longer and hotter heat waves, more frequent crop-killing droughts, etc., etc. You've probably all heard that one, that the internet is responsible for 2% of global carbon emissions, which in perspective is the same amount as aviation's. This is a bit of an exaggeration because this isn't exactly accurate. This doesn't include the embedded carbon of the aviation industry, but I think this puts IT industry surfing on the web, browsing Facebook, Instagram, it does have a huge impact on the emissions. So I always, like to highlight that. And also, according to that, by 2030, the internet is on track to consume as much as 20% of world's electricity, which is, pretty nuts. Some adding stats in the world of climate change: 60% of the wildlife have been lost since 1970. Over the past 2 decades, 9 sea levels have risen by 3.2 millimeters per annum. We are on course to lose over half of all insects by the end of the century. I don't know if you've noticed, but when you're driving on a motorway like 10, 20 years ago, you would get all these insects on your windscreen. Your windscreen would be covered with them, and now you're driving and you get like maybe 5 flies on the windscreen. It is happening. We are on course to last year, Greenland has set a new record for ice loss, which is 332 billion tons of ice that's just melted. Music streaming is accounted for 200 to 350 million kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions in 2015 and 16, and that is in the US only. If you were to listen to an album 27 times by streaming it in full, it is likely that manufacturing and producing the same album would be more environmentally friendly than streaming it. And basing it on that, I've done some calculations to see how many emissions we would emit by just listening to Spotify in the office. So for 21 working days, 8 hours per day, we would emit as many emissions as we would driving almost 20 miles by an average passenger vehicle. Old phones contribute to 3 million metric tons of e-waste each year, of which less than 16% is correctly recycled. On a side note, data centers are extremely carbon intensive. Most of them are still powered by the good old fossil fuels. They consume 3% of global electricity supply and account for 2% of total greenhouse emissions. when I tweet my slides, I'm going to tweet a link to an open letter to Amazon, which you can sign, which asks people to sign it so that we can get more green service provided by Amazon, because most of them are still not powered on renewables. Right, so what can we do? How can we, what changes can we do within our organizations so that we can, help the world? I believe that the first step of making fundamental changes is to start a conversation. Get your team together and talk about the importance of the climate crisis and why it is important for your organization to help. As much as the whole team should be involved in conversations, I believe that assigning one person to be sustainability, chief officer, ninja, whatever you want to call it, it should take place so that this person could keep everyone in the team accountable, so that the whole organization was accountable for the changes. We did that when GDPR legislation happened. We said that the GDPR officers in the office, we can do that with this as well. If you have ability to do it, I would recommend calculating your organization's carbon footprint, seeing what impact it has on the environment. B Corp website's got a great tool over there. It is fairly okay to use, so I would recommend that you do that. And most importantly, write down a solid internal policies for your organization. I believe that this is the most important step, so that you're not just having another meeting, another coffee break, that you are taking this seriously, and that everyone, hops on board, and everyone is feeling accountable for the changes that you're making. Sorry, I'm going to talk through some things that I believe you should add to your policies. Of course, you can add more or add less, but I believe these are the core ones that could be included. So the first one, ensure that as an organization, you minimize your waste by recycling and composting, and adding water dispensers instead of using bottled water, if you can have any water from the tap. With composting, it does sound silly. People are really scared of composting, and I don't know why, but you can put a little bin in the office, you can close it, it doesn't smell, but you are actually going to reduce your waste and do something good with it. There is an app called Share Waste. If you don't know what to do with your composting, you can go on this app and say, listen, I've got all this waste, does anyone want it? And this app, people share that they've got composting bins, so like they want people to bring them scraps, etc. So it's really wicked app. It's really good, and there are even a few people in Cornwall who use it, which is amazing. Right, next thing, opt in for low carbon travel options. When you go to events, meetings, anything, pick trains over flying and driving. I know they're more expensive and it takes way longer to get to places, but imagine how many podcasts you can listen to on the way, or how much work you could do. This one is quite controversial. People don't like that, but when you have client meetings, why not go for plant-based catering? It's agriculture has a huge CO2 emissions. So by minimizing it in our meeting, in our workspace, we are helping. Get your team on board with the principles of green software engineering and build carbon efficient applications. These 8 principles form shared understanding of what it means to be a green software engineer, and it's independent of application domain, industry, organization size or type, cloud, whether it's cloud vendor or self-hosted, the programming language or framework. And these principles ask you to build the applications that are carbon efficient, that you build applications that are energy efficient, that they consume electricity with the lowest carbon intensity, that you build applications that are hardware efficient, that you maximize the energy efficiency of the hardware, that you reduce the amount of data and the distance it travels across the network, and that you build carbon-aware applications. And lastly, that you focus on step-by-step optimization that increases the overall carbon efficiency. I realize this was a lot of information, but you can look into it in more details later. And build resilient web, build solid foundations, build your sites accessible and performant. The more resilient web we build, the longer it's going to survive. And the need for, phone or laptop upgrades is going to decrease. We don't need brand new iPhones the moment they come out of the market, nor do your clients. So if we can extend the lifespan of the products that we're building, is going to make it worthwhile. And check your website, how your website is impacting the planet. Once you've finished building the site, add a website carbon calculator to be added to your release checklist. You can go on there and see how performant or how efficient or inefficient the site is. And most importantly, well, for me, I feel like that's most important. I believe the green hosting should be offered by default. You can add it to the contract with clients. If they question your pricing or why you're opting for green hosting, just be honest and don't be afraid to tell them that it is important. That it is important because we're in the middle of climate crisis, and companies like yours is jumping on board. The Green Web Foundation's got a huge directory where you can find, all the available green hosting packages. Added in this policy, I would recommend you organize 11 at 11. 11 at 11 is this initiative that encourages people to spend 11 minutes every Friday at 11 o'clock to talk about current state of environment and climate change. And be vocal. Don't be afraid to talk about what you're doing internally. Write a blog post, tweet about it, go to conferences, and make sure that this isn't just shoved under the carpet, but it is being talked about because it is important. So to summarize it, start conversations, find sustainability officer, create internal policy that will include how you behave within the office, and what how your work is going. Organize 11 at 11 and be vocal about it all. Other than that, I would recommend you join organizations that focus on green tech, such as climate action tech, and participate in campaigns that these organizations run. Like there was the Green Web campaign that run throughout January, which was really great. We are in the middle of climate crisis, and we both as individuals and as organizations, we just need to speak about it. We need to be vocal, and I feel like more companies, more organizations jump on board, it is better for everyone. So yes, we do only have 10 years left to prevent irreversible damage from climate change, but hopefully during the talk you've learned something, and you can take it to the office, you and your team can jump on board, and we can make the web greener. Thank you. Right.
Thank you so much, Natalia. That's brilliant. Thank you. We've got a few questions coming in as well, so and we will jump to that Q&A at the very end. So thanks very much. Brilliant. There's a few things I certainly did learn from that, so that was really good. A few things I have seen before, which is really good. I'm sure a lot of the audience haven't, so That's really, thank you. So we're going to jump on with our next talk, and this is from Chris Flack. If you want, oh, and here he is. Here's Chris, joining us from New Zealand. So Chris started Make Act Now, and which is a protest for the digital generation. Chris's career has taken him from one side of the world to the other and back again. At the heart of all his work is an honest simplicity and a love for the craft. His ideas have been featured in everything from Mashable to Creative Review, and his designs have graced the walls of Mexican Museum of Design and Off Festival in Barcelona. He regularly writes, judges, and talks, too much apparently, about design. But we've invited Chris along because he's, as I said, Make Act Now is a really interesting project, and we'll hear more about it from Chris. If you feel free to start a presentation if you've got one.
Awesome. Yes, I have a presentation. I'll just do the old Zoom check. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Okay. And is that working? Is that full screen? Is that working?
No, not seeing any screen sharing at the moment.
Oh, cool. Sorry. We'll just go back to Zoom. Share screen. Okay. How about that? Cool. Thank you. Okay. Cool. Right. Make Act Now. Three powerful words, which in themselves form a statement about action, about climate change. So I'm going to kind of lead you through a story that started about this time last year. That has led me and a lot of other designers on a kind of long climate change journey. So here we go. So a protest for the digital generation. So as we all know, our world clock is running out pretty fast. As the last speaker just said, we've probably got about 10 years. In some ways, that's quite optimistic. In other ways, it's a little bit pessimistic, but that's the reality of what we're facing right now. There is something really, really wrong with the world. Be great to be able to go back. This was one of the web pages for our website, 404. Let's go back, but sadly we can't go back. Climate change is climate crisis, one of the bigger challenges we're going to face now and for our kind of children's generation. So as I said, it feels like probably about 12 months ago. There were big fires in Australia. Every year Australia has bushfires, but for some reason the bushfires of kind of 2019 and 2020 were bigger than they've ever been before. Hectares and hectares of bush were burning, and as you can see from these photos, it was pretty dramatic. This could actually be the bushfires could be seen from space, which is pretty incredible. And also the bushfires, or the smoke from the bushfires, could be seen from New Zealand. One day I kind of was sitting there with my young son. He was 1 and a bit, and he said, "Dad, why is it grey outside? Why can't we see the sun?" And it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was what should have been quite a nice Christchurch day, but the whole sky was coloured in this kind of grey fog. I explained to him, hey, there are bushfires, or there are fires in Australia 2,700 kilometres away, and they've drifted across to us. And as all kind of 1-year-olds say, they keep asking questions, and he was like, Dad, why, Dad, why? So kind of hold that thought, and I was like, well, what can I do? How can I, as one person, create some action, create some change? What can I do? As a graphic designer, as that kind of intro said, I am a graphic designer. I've been doing it for 18 years. I believe, design can change things, and also can have a lot of power if used in the right way. Throughout history, people have used posters or design to create action. Sometimes it's motivational action. So in 1939, to help keep the British public calm with the onset of war, these were posters were put up which said, "Keep calm and carry on." They were distributed everywhere, and to help, keep the British public, keep going, stay calm, keep carrying on. And then this obviously has been reintroduced for COVID and things like that, but it's still a very strong message. Posters can also be used in a political situation. So before Obama got elected to office, there was a famous street art artist who put together a poster. The original poster said progress on it, but then once it was shown to Obama's team, they said, actually, we would love to use this word hope. This became a symbol of his campaign, and over 350,000 of these posters were printed. Stickers, it's been parodied everywhere, and it's probably one of the most famous pieces of street art that has become art or become a political piece to kind of stand for. And then obviously environmental or protests are a great place where posters and action come together. In this case, Greta, I'm sure everyone I'm talking to today knows about. She went outside Parliament and said, "Hey, I'm not going to go back to school until you listen to what I'm saying." She's 15. She was 15 at the time. And this has kind of led her to do a lot more things and become very, very prominent figure for protests around the world. But she is a pretty inspiring person. So the question was for me, how can I act? How can I, from little old New Zealand or New Zealand on the bottom of the world, next to Australia, seeing what's happening to my friends over in Australia, this big bushfire. How can I help? What can I do? One thing I noticed, especially in this digital age, is that social media feeds are becoming the new picket line. So what I mean by this is what people are choosing to share, what they like, what they stand for in this COVID world, when a lot of us are locked down or locked in and we can't get out there. It's what we put in our social feeds that allow us to kind of show who we support politically, what we stand for, and some of our values, especially around climate change and what can be done as a generation to get together and kind of fight against it and share the message. So hold that thought, because that's pretty important in how this campaign came across. So as a designer, as I said, I was at home. I explained to my young son about fires in Australia. What could I do? I talked about the history of posters being a kind of a way that designers go to when they're in need of kind of sharing a message. So the next day, I was still kind of thinking about what I could do, and this popped up on Instagram, which is like the go-to for designers these days, and a great way to kind of see what other designers are doing. A notable Australian designer called Christopher Doyle did this poster, Advance Australia Fair. Very, very simple. He's taken the name, the words from their national anthem, and taken fair as with a slightly different meaning, as in what is the government currently doing, and how can they fight against protests against climate change. He put this poster up, made it available for free, which is the key thing. He made it for free, and this became quite widely shared. And a lot of other designers in Australia went down and used that as a kind of a symbol for protesting against climate change. Then another designer, Paul Garbutt, another well-known Australian designer, kind of had the same idea based off what Chris Doyle had done. He said, well, actually, I want to join, I want to be part of this, I want to share a slightly different message. So he took these great lyrics from Midnight Oil, how can you sleep while beds are burning, and took some ashes that were falling from the sky, just how bad it is, how bad it was over in Australia, and used that to make this beautiful poster. He also ended with a couple of strong words, which were climate action now. Climate action now. So 3 words, very important. So we're going full circle back to what can I do? So in New Zealand with my son, I'm thinking, well, hey, how can I create something to kind of, lend my support, not in Australia, in New Zealand, but, I can do something digitally. So I keep looking at these words, climate action now. I then commissioned my 1.5-year-old to help me out and print out a bit of type, quite pretty basic bit of typography, and got the wee guy scribbling, and then with the use of a crayon and a bit of kind of coaxing him how to kind of colour it in a bit. Climate Action Now became Made Act Now. And Made Act Now became what I would call like a catch cry or a way to engage your community. So mate has a few meanings over in New Zealand and Australia. So mate can mean a friend. Also, you know, a kind of a friend next door or a friend overseas. Australians have this great saying, which is "G'day, mate." You know, which you could take slightly tongue in cheek, but also it's really important because it's like actually they are our mates and how can we help them? So Mate Act Now was a call to, hey mate, friends around the world to act now. So join in and help and become part of a movement. So I thought, well, actually, let's follow what those guys have done. Put my poster up on Instagram and Facebook, and I gave it away for free. Interesting enough, I share a lot about design, a lot about kind of climate change on Facebook with my friends. But most of the time, my design stuff, my friends aren't really that into, because it's just, oh yeah, that's pretty, it looks great, lovely design. But when I shared this, because it kind of combined, well, it did, sorry, combine design and design for good and an environmental message. Suddenly, they started sharing this and saying, hey, Chris, this is awesome. How can we get involved? It's great that you made this valuable for free. And I was like, wow, this is, you know, it's got a few likes, a few shares, it's actually got a bit of traction. I actually think if I got a big group of people together, like designers, creative artists, like a massive range of people, with the same idea of let's share the message about what's happening in Australia, and let's you know, get everyone involved in sharing a message digitally. Can then be amplified using Instagram and social media, so more people can see it, and also they can really kind of talk about what's happening in Australia. So that was great, but as I started to look into this and saying, okay, we can talk about Australia, but Australia is only one part of the climate change or the climate crisis message. As you've already heard, you know, there are, it is a global challenge. There are icebergs melting in Antarctica and Arctic. They're melting at a phenomenal rate. I think it's like a 1.5 degree increase in temperature will lead to us losing millions and millions of this water, you know, sorry, of it melting and kind of raising the sea levels. So as I said, it's not just Australia. This is a global challenge. We're losing hectares of rainforest every day for kind of many different reasons. Some to do with, you know, what you've just heard about Spotify, about streaming, about kind of carbon credits and internet and things we do. So as I started to look into this, and I started to realize actually this is very much a global challenge. And then this goes full circle, because currently, as I'm doing this talk over in Sydney, poor Australia doesn't have much of a let off. They are having in the middle of some of the worst floods in probably 60, 70 years. You know, the rivers are arriving fast in central Sydney and around that area, and it's just, you know, crazy. You go from fires to floods. So it's not just about Australia, it's about obviously a worldwide challenge. And this is also happening within that space of COVID. So I kind of thought, actually, now I'm going to reach out to as many people as I can and say, hey, can you get involved and can we be part of this? I'd love you to create a piece of communication. A poster has generally been the easiest way for designers and advertisers to get together and create a kind of single message. So I did that. I reached out to friends, people around the world, and asked them to get involved. We had over 300 designers get involved from around the world, and many more who shared on their Facebook and social. And they all started to share these messages. I'm just going to show you a few of these messages that were really, really powerful. This one about global warming. You know, global warming is actually global warning. A really kind of simple message, which I'm sure the Americans will resonate with. Make Earth greater again. Great play on Make Earth great again. so simple. Sometimes global warming, like as a kind of a statement, doesn't kind of doesn't make sense when it's freezing outside. This was all the way from Manual in San Francisco. Then other times, a simple, powerful graphic can say it all. An ice cream, we all love them, we all eat them. Kids love to eat them, love to drop them. I think this is a great play on kind of where we are with the world. If we don't look after it, it's melting. It's slowly going away. Other times, are we just this kind of big ice block just slowly waiting to melt away? Creative review. So a very influential design blog said these posters tackle the looming climate crisis, reminding people of the urgency of addressing it and changing behaviour to do so. So design ideally can influence change, but action is the key thing, which is what I'm saying about MADAC now. This here was looking at how different statistics over time change, but water is one of the key things that holds it all together. A great animation by DIA over in New York, showing that the probable increase in temperature over the next 50 years, that kind of 1.5 degree increase is really going to put us in a bad situation. It's going to be super hot. Especially in New Zealand, the sea levels are going to rise, and a lot of our houses are built around the coast, and they're not going to be around. So great way of kind of visualizing on this. Sometimes animation, in terms of like kind of temperature and things like that, can really help to showcase a simple message. Sorry, display. Right. Okay. Sometimes great designer Vince Frost, actually a British guy moving over to Australia, who's done a lot of great things with typography, put this poster out. The world doesn't need another wanky designer poster. Kind of sums it up. We don't always need more posters. We need people sharing more messages. But even great designers can forget to check their spelling. It should actually be doesn't. World doesn't need another wanky designer poster. A great thing about design and about I guess working in the advertising design industry is we do spend a lot of times printing things. We do these beautiful talks, and then people print out these slides. So one of our kind of things was, which this poster sums up, please consider environment before printing this poster. I think that you could say that, please consider this environment before printing this website. One of the key things we did, which I'll talk a bit more about lately, is that we made this website, and as I said, we gave all the posters away for free. But one of our big things was we want people to share these posters digitally. So there'd be no need to print them, because we didn't want to create more waste. But if you were going to go to a rally or somewhere like that, yes, of course you could print them. But we kind of wanted to make sure the environment was a key part of what we were doing. Hey, as I said, the sea levels are rising. Eiffel Tower, a great symbol for that. But what happens if it rose so much that we could only see the top of it? One of the kind of interesting things that came out of COVID was in Italy. I think so. Within the lockdown, it started to the air started to become cleaner, and dolphins started to appear in Venice and swimming around the canals. So sometimes from kind of like tragedies and crisis, beautiful things can start to emerge. So we started to have this kind of sense of serenity, and this really illustrated that quite well. Other messages were more kind of like about what you can actually do. So things like join protests, ideally join a digital protest if you can't get out. Look at how you travel. One of the big things I've noticed is how much, especially in New Zealand, we are kind of stuck with using cars. Our cities are set up for cars, but in Christchurch, we push to take bikes, which is really kind of helpful. Make some noise. Vote with your money. Brands, a message gets really across to a brand when you either don't buy their product or you kind of talk out against them. There have been quite a few brands recently that have come out with different ways of doing things. We've got one, I think it's called Eco Care in New Zealand, where you can now take the plastic bottles that the product comes in, you can take that bottle back into the supermarket at a pump, and you get your kind of shampoo straight into the bottle that you already had. So there are many different ways to kind of make little changes every day. I kind of call it the kind of 1% or 2% change. Make a small change every day, it can make a big difference. Less eat meat, support local, a massive thing we were doing in New Zealand throughout lockdown, and kind of come out from that is support local, give our local businesses our money rather than ordering something from Auckland. We'll get it from Christchurch. So a great way of kind of keeping those messages clear. Hey, do we need a plan B? Is that plant-based? There are a lot of really kind of clever ways of using food now. There is plant that tastes like meat, but then again, you could just have plant. But yeah, there's a lot of power in eating plants. So we had this massive collection of posters that kind of shared different messages, some about Australia, some about the kind of global climate change crisis, some about how individuals can act, and then some kind of inspiring people to do different things. So there was over 300 posters that was submitted as part of this movement. It was then about, okay, how do we activate this? So Earth Day come along in last year. So Earth Day was the 20th of April 2020. It's a global day which is recognised to celebrate Earth. And there were many different kind of activities and things that were launched. So for MadeAct now, I decided Earth Day was the perfect day to launch this to the world. So we launched this. I kind of watched it launch and move around the world. We came up with this website to launch it. The website had something quite clever. Hopefully this will show on the video, where over time, as you interacted with the site, as you didn't interact with the site, the color of the site changed, basically to kind of illustrate how, if we don't act now, the world's heating up and temperatures are going to rise, and you've just got to do something because, as we said, we're not in a very good position. So that's heated up. The idea was to interact with this website to kind of stop it from going what we call crisis mode. Our website also had every poster on it, which you could click on. You could learn a little bit more about it. You could then do one click to share it either on your Instagram feed, Facebook feed, or Twitter feed. This is basically the key mechanic behind the digital campaign. We wanted to get this shared as far and as fast as possible. So obviously all the artists were sharing their posters, the friends of the friends of the artists, the friends of the friends of the friends, the followers. Some of these designers have, so there's one that's got about 1.something million followers. A lot of them have got 20, 30,000 followers. So we could really start this movement. As I kind of said before, social media feeds are now becoming the new protest lines, especially during lockdown when, what do? You go straight to your phone, you like something, as soon as you like something, it amplifies it. You share something, more and more people can see it. Pretty simple, it's how things go viral, but for something to go viral, it needs to have, I think it needs to have stickability, but also needs to, be authentic and real. There is no brand behind this. I'm not a brand, I'm a person. And it was just a whole lot of people getting behind to share a message, firstly about Australia, then about COVID. As you can see, it was shared wide and far. Everyone doing, whether it's a message they got from the poster, part of the poster, animation, creative review, massive design blog, which kind of reaches further in design. Said real life protests might be on hold, but activism has moved over into the digital realm. As I said, people can't get out into the streets, they can't do much, but they can get out and protest. So designers around the world unite in a digital protest, locked inside, but could, obviously do things. To fight against climate change, MadeAct now gave us a digital voice to protest with, as we can't currently take to the streets to protest, creating and forming human chain around anything, but we can still come together digitally. We found in New Zealand, we were in lockdown here, and I know a lot of the world were, being stuck in a room like I kind of am now doing this presentation. I think you can feel a little bit, slightly down. So it was good to have something to get behind it from. I had a lot of feedback from designers and just general people interested in climate change and making the world better, saying, hey, this gave us something to get behind. It gave us a distraction from the day-to-day work and something for us to kind of be involved and be part of. As you can see, there's a couple of examples there where it went into different languages in terms of we had designers from Croatia. I think we had like maybe 35 or 36 countries around the world, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. So a great flavour. So we managed to create this global conversation on climate action, but using social media and using what we all use as a way to kind of power that. Taking the power of a simple message of a poster, but making that global. This was then obviously shared through the kind of design and press media. There were some big names. Big names are great. Big names involved in the design advertising community. They're great because they help to amplify messages. But so design blogs and things like pick it up. But I kind of think a lot of it was more about the message that was in the pieces. Some of my favorite designs were actually just from people that had kind of just wrote it and said, hey, I'd love to be involved or have seen the brief. Like local designers. We had some Aboriginal design from Australia as well. So there's a lot of really good kind of conversations, people joining in. So launched on Earth Day, and then it just grew and grew. More designers got involved. On the website, you can currently sign up to a kind of a set of values that we'd like people to follow and use and become part of. So that was cool. We got lots of coverage, got it out there, got people involved, got people seeing things. But my other thing was, how can we make some money? Like I wanted to make a little bit of money to donate to the bushfires, because it was about that. It was about kind of helping that initiative at the start. But then, when I started, I did not know, none of us knew that COVID was going to come along and change our lives. So in one way, I wanted to ask people for money, but it was quite a tricky balance, because when I initially thought about it, I thought, hey, we'll sell the posters. But as I kind of went away from selling posters, because I was like, I actually want this to be shared and be something that is freely available, and not to have money as a thing that gets in the way. So I thought about it, and I thought, hey, we can make a limited edition book. This book would then profile the 200 best posters, or the 200 posters that shared the kind of most best variety of messages. But this book would also have some essays in it that we couldn't put on the website. So this book had 3 pieces of writing in it. One piece of writing by a climate activist, who's a good friend of mine, called Adrian Teller. He wrote this lovely piece of long form copy that talked about where we are now, in terms of we're at this kind of crossroads, at this point of no going back. How we've created this problem, but actually, if we all kind of all band together and get behind initiatives like Made Act Now, and numerous other ones, we can actually make a difference. Then the second piece of copy was a short little kind of, I guess, call to arms, which was just entitled "More Than Ever," and that was very simply about more than ever. Now is the time for us to get together. Think about what we're doing, think about our actions, and really just look to change what we do. And this was talking about the kind of 1% and 2% changes. Little changes can have a big effect. And then the last piece was about the history of the humble poster, the humble poster, and how a poster can, as we said, it can be a political stand. It can help to calm people in times of war. It can be used simply as a piece of handwriting at the picket line, on social media to share a message. But the thing about posters is words on a poster are great, but the thing that give them action is the person who is behind them. And that was one of the key things I've kind of taken away from this. One was we got a massive amount of reach. 7 million was the potential amount of people that could see this. That was from basically social media. Kind of throughout the campaign, we had over 1,000 posts and stories. Instagram stories are becoming the way to share a message. because they can get reshared and reshared and reshared. I talked a lot about the book. So the book was about finding a way to raise some money. So we sold 200 copies of the book, so raised $5,000 for the Bushfire Relief Fund. One thing I forgot to say, or didn't mention about the book, was all printed on eco-friendly paper. I spent a lot of time working with a paper company called BJ Bull. So the cover was all everything was recyclable. We planted 1,000 trees. So every book we planted 2 trees for that book to offset any carbon. Mainly the carbon was mainly to do with when the book was posted, because I wanted everything to be as neutral as possible. And then everything was sent out in special, I think they're like kind of cornstarch bags that could be biodegradable. So there was a lot of thought about how, like, not to kind of like just print something for the sake of printing it, but to make sure it had a reason behind it. But my kind of key thing is, obviously posters are great. You know, this was a great way of sharing a message, sharing it digitally. But posters won't change the world. Like, we can keep doing posters, but it's not going to change anything. People's actions will. So we encourage you to share a message any way you can. Obviously, it'd be great if you share these posters, because, you know, some of them are beautifully, or most of them are beautifully designed. And they're free. They're freely available to be shared across any media or used throughout classrooms, or as a digital resource. But they're all there. MadeItNow.com is where you can go to find out more. This is one of the heroes of the campaign, not me. My little boy Leo Max. So he was the one with the crayons. He was the one who kind of said, "Dad, why is there kind of grey skies outside? Why is it like this in January in Christchurch?" And I said, "Well, mate, act now." I said, "Mate, hey, these are things that hopefully you're not going to have to deal with as much, because hopefully our generation will do a lot of change and do some things to actually make a difference. But hopefully this, I can help in my own little way." So time is running out, and also that's time is running out on my talk. So thank you for listening in, and thank you for hopefully making a change. Cheers.
Thanks, Chris. That was great. Really great talk. Love some of those posters there. We've got a few questions. We've captured those, and we'll put those to you at the end. So next up, we have Pim van Barsen. So as I mentioned earlier, Silverstone Technology Park are a long-term supporter of Geek Night. We can't do 1 minute wonders. Those of you who attend our usual events know we do 1 minute wonders. Neil, we miss you. But we can't do them virtually. But when Pim asked to speak to you about Silverstone Technology Cluster, we are more than happy to say yes. So Pim, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. Silverstone Technology Cluster, we're a cluster support organization looking after advanced engineering, electronics, and software businesses in the Silverstone area. That's anywhere within an hour's driving time from Silverstone. So obviously Milton Keynes is very much captured in that. What does that mean, a cluster support organization? So we're here to help these businesses. As you can see behind me, we do promotion support and thought leadership. So a lot of what we do is focused around bringing people together and encouraging them to collaborate around specific issues as well. With support, we actually help a lot of companies sort of grow their business and bring their business to the next level. So we're one of 5 Trailblazer partners for B2B business in the UK. So as a result of that, we can now offer a number of programs to help businesses grow further, such as SME advisory boards or mentoring or even leadership training. And we can provide all of that free of charge. So if you're interested in that, let us know. And then with the thought leadership, what we do is we bring people together around different areas of technology. And we've got a number of groups that we operate at the moment. And especially relevant for this talk this evening is our Future Mobility Group, where we bring together a number of organizations that are all very active in the future of our mobility and what we're going to do. And actually on September the 9th, we'll have an event that is specifically focused on the road to zero. And it's kind of like, what can we all do in terms of infrastructure, in terms of cars, in terms of flight, in terms of everything that we do to make sure that we arrive at the environmentally sound solutions that we need to get to in order to combat the climate crisis. So if any of that has piqued your interest, then please have a look at our website, silverstoneTechnologyCluster.com. We're very keen to engage with different communities, which is why we've been working with Richard as well. And yeah, fantastic to be here. And thank you very much for the presentation so far. They've been super interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Pim. So just wanted to say thanks once again to Protospace and Guru and Silverstone Technology Park, as Pim just mentioned, and Pixel Creation Tito for sponsoring and partnering with our event tonight, and ongoing for most of them as well for a long time. So thank you very much. And that brings us on to our last talk of the evening before the Q&A, which is Tom Greenwood. Welcome, Tom.
Hello. Tom
is the co-founder of Whole Grain Digital, a certified B Corp and green trailblazer in the digital agency world. Tom is known for writing and speaking about how business, design, and web technology can be part of the solution to environmental issues, and is the author of the book Sustainable Web Design, which I have got, and I must admit I still haven't had the time to read it yet, so I will get around to that. That's on a book apart as well. So I'm going to hand you over to Tom, and a greener web is better for everyone. Thanks, Tom.
Richard. Let me share my screen. Okay. Yes, so I'm going to talk about how a greener web is better for everyone. And they're going to go through some of the sort of more practical things you can do in digital projects, and hopefully give you a bit of inspiration of things that you can use sort of day to day if you're working on design and development projects. As Natalia was talking about earlier, the internet has a huge carbon footprint. And I think it's important to just sort of emphasize this up front, that one of the big issues is the fact that actually most people don't realize that the internet has any carbon footprint. Really, it's sort of this invisible thing. There's no exhaust pipe on your laptop or your smartphone. You don't see any fumes coming out the top. It's all hidden away, and everything looks very clean and inert, and just sort of utopian in some ways in terms of its environmental impact. And it's just important to sort of recognize that although we see a plane flying into the sky and we see the jet trails over our heads, and we know that there's a big impact associated with one plane flying from London to Paris or to New York or wherever it's going, even though the individual interactions of an individual thing we do on the internet, like this event this evening, for example, are kind of a tiny drop in a huge ocean, there are trillions and trillions of those things happening around the world every day with billions of people, billions of connected devices, and all of it is consuming electricity. And so when we scale that up, the internet's emissions are equivalent to one of the most polluting countries. Germany is often cited, and as Natalia said, similar to the aviation industry in terms of annual emissions. So this is a huge impact that we really need to be taking responsibility for and action on as an industry. And it's something that we can't really shy away from. We have both an opportunity and a threat, in the sense that the internet is one of the easiest things to decarbonize. It all runs on electricity. So we can rapidly increase the efficiency of it, and we can switch it over to renewable supplies in a way that there's much bigger challenges with, for example, aviation and concrete and steel and these sorts of industries that really have huge technical challenges. Actually, the internet is the low-hanging fruit. The threat, on the other hand, is that it's one of the fastest growing sources of emissions and energy consumption. And so although it has the opportunity to be decarbonized very quickly, it is actually going the other way. So where is this energy being consumed? It's being consumed primarily in three places: in data centers, in the transmission networks that move this data constantly around the globe between the data centers and the people who are connected to the internet, like us this evening, and in the end user devices. So that's your smartphone, your laptop, your tablet, your smart TV, whatever it happens to be. But also not just in the operation of these things, but in the manufacturing of all of them, in the manufacturing of all of the servers, in the manufacturing of and construction of these huge transmission networks that do span the entire globe with fiber optic and copper cables, and in the manufacturing of billions of connected devices that tends to have a lifespan of only around 3 years. So we're constantly manufacturing billions more of these devices with resources being extracted from the ground. And of course, as Natalia also said earlier, like, you know, huge e-waste problem that goes with that. So we need to save energy. Where can we save energy? Well, the obvious answer is in all of these 3 places. In data centers, we can save energy primarily by reducing server load. We take the load off the servers, then they don't have to do very much, and we need far fewer servers, which also saves on the manufacturing side, how many servers are actually required. We can save energy in the transmission of actually just reducing the sheer amount of data that needs to be transmitted. And we can save energy in the end user devices by reducing the amount of energy used both in the processor and in the screen, which I'll touch on later. And when we do this, we don't just benefit the planet, we also benefit people. And I think this is what I will try to sort of weave in this evening and highlight, is that people often look at environmental action as sort of one more thing that we need to do, and we're already busy, or you know, maybe we'll do it if we have time, but it's a bit of an afterthought and we've got other priorities. But actually, what we found in our work at Whole Grain Digital is that when you actually use sustainability in digital projects as a lens, that like this is a priority, it actually drives better results in the things that people care about more typically in digital projects, which is, you know, user experience, conversion rates, SEO, accessibility. These things can actually be massively benefited by a focus on sustainability. So there really is no downside, but there's a huge amount to gain. So I'm going to go through sort of 10 things that that I think are like great things to look at in digital projects, and then I hope that somewhere everybody will find something that they could use on a future project. So I think all 3 presentations this evening have had a slide that said, so what can we do? So we're obviously great minds think alike. So my first point here is streamlining user journeys. And this might not sound like an environmental thing, but actually it can have quite a profound impact. So a huge amount of energy is used in, you know, processing data when we load web pages, transmitting that data, and on our end user devices when we load pages. And a lot of time that's spent on the internet and a lot of pages that are visited are actually with people just looking for what they're trying to find. They're in a sense that they're lost. They're in the supermarket going down the wrong aisle, but in the digital world. And good user experience is actually an environmental gain. If we can get people in and out of that digital supermarket or whatever that website does as efficiently and as quickly as possible, we're going to be saving significant amounts of energy when you scale it up across like the thousands or tens of thousands or, you know, millions of people that use that website. And this is not just, you know, this is not just good for the environment, but obviously streamlined user journeys are great for the user. You save them time, they feel happier, less frustrated, more satisfied. They're more likely to come back, but also they're more likely to reach their goal, whatever that is. It might be e-commerce, that might be, you know, actually buying the thing they wanted to. It may not be good for the environment. Or it may, you know, your website may be doing something else, and maybe providing information to people or giving them an option to actually sort of fill in a form and submit some data. Whatever it is that they need to do on the service that you're creating, the faster they can get in and out, the better it is for them, the better it is for you, and the better it is for the environment. The second point is really using images efficiently. So images have a huge opportunity to sort of tell a story and build an emotional connection with people. But in terms of actual data consumption, they're generally the single biggest source of data transfer on any website, and similarly, you know, on apps that are kind of loading data organically. So there's a huge amount to gain by using images efficiently. Firstly, like using less images and be really mindful about like, what is this image for? Do we really need a stock image of some people in an office pointing at a whiteboard? What real value does that offer to the user? And if it does add real value, great. But if it doesn't, then keep it out. Maybe keep the design more streamlined, have more space. Use alternatives to photography, such as, you know, vector shapes, CSS color and shape, typography. There's lots of sort of efficient things that you can do in design that other than having like lots of big photos just because you think that's what a website should have. And then on a technical level, optimizing the images that you do have, whether they're photographs or whether they're, you know, vector graphics. There's a lot that you can do to optimize those and get the file sizes really, really small. A service such as Short Pixel, for example, is like a great service for optimizing images. And I'll just quickly show you an example of, like, you know, some of the gains that you can make within an image to optimize it without really doing anything kind of particularly technical. So here's a picture of one of my neighbors, and this is a full screen picture. So it's 1280 by 800, and it's a 1.2 megabyte file at that size. If I halve the dimensions, I actually more than half the file size. So half the dimensions, I bring it down to 360 kilobytes, so it's 70% smaller than the original one. But actually, if you work this into a website design, instead of a full screen image, you could still create probably just as big an emotional connection, just as big an impact, if you worked it in cleverly with space and typography and perhaps, you know, color and shape. But what's interesting on the right-hand side is that it's the same image, it's the same size. All I've done is blurred the edges of the image, and I've nearly halved it again. It's now 192 kilobytes. And basically this is because the size of image files is related to the amount of detail in the image. So photographs with shallow depth of field inherently have a smaller file size. And similarly, you know, if you cut this horse out and you put it on a solid color background, you could get the file size down even further. So there's clever things you can do in the design of the imagery itself to actually mean that it's sort of, even if it's the same size, it's just going to have inherently a lower file size. So that's really something to think about in terms of the actual kind of brand style, the art direction that you apply to a project. And then also, like, thinking about the actual color itself, because image, as I said, the detail in the image is what contributes to the file size. So if you cut the color out, for example, make it black and white, you can get the file size down even further. And you can actually do nice things. So it doesn't have to be black and white. It could just be monochrome, but in a different color. So it could be blue and white or red and white, or, you know, whatever monochrome combination you want to use. So you can get quite creative with that. And then you can also look at alternative file formats. So, you know, typically we put JPEG images on a website for photographs, but WebP is you know, accepted by all modern browsers and has massively smaller file sizes than JPEG. So, and you can get plugins for things like WordPress that will do that conversion automatically. And there's a new format called AVIF, which, although it's not accepted by all browsers yet, it seems to be getting accepted faster than any image format in the past. So within, I would imagine within a couple of years, that will be standard. And AVIF files look the same. There's no loss of image quality, but they're about half the size of WebP. So there's opportunities to have beautiful images on websites, but use tiny amounts of data. So that's really exciting. So having said that, images are the sort of main use of data on websites, the caveat is that that's only really true if you don't have videos. Videos consume huge amounts of data. And so it's really worth thinking really mindfully about how you use video on the web. And one of the things to avoid, if at all possible, is autoplay video. Autoplay videos mean that every single person that visits that page is going to have to stream that video. And or consume all of that data, that also has an impact on web performance. You're also consuming their data, which, you know, they might not be happy about. You didn't ask them whether they wanted to actually consume so much data. And it can be annoying as well, especially if the video has sound. I mean, maybe not now, we're all working from home, but when you're in the olden days when we sat in an office and you'd open the website and it would start spurting sound out, it could be pretty embarrassing and annoying. So mindful use of video is definitely like a big win. And even if you are going to think about, we need some sort of movement, we need to tell a story in a sort of animated way on a website, you don't necessarily always have to use like a video. There's alternatives such as you can use interactive animations where people can actually click through the stages of the animation. Airbnb have an open source library called Lottie, which you can export things from After Effects, put them into Lottie, and then put them onto the web. And the file sizes compared to like an equivalent video are far, far smaller. And the beauty of it is it's better for people because on a video, you kind of have to watch the whole video before you know whether the video is useful to you or not. So if there's a 5-minute video, explain a video, you have to sit there for 5 minutes before you actually know whether or not this is useful. Whereas when you have an interactive animation, you can kind of skim through it quickly like you do on any web page, and you can click through the stages and say, nah, oh yeah, there's the bit I'm looking for. So the user experience can be massively enhanced. It can save people time on the web, which again, saving energy, but also it can be better for accessibility because you can have text built into this sort of interactive animation alongside the imagery, which is readable by a screen reader, readable by search engines, so it's better for SEO. There's some really good things you can do as an alternative to video. So I would always look at video as really a last resort in telling the story online. And there's much more efficient ways for people and planet of telling those stories often. So now I'm going to move on to fonts, and basically like fonts are something that often don't get thought about that much in terms of like their impact, not just on the environment, but on web performance in general. And system fonts have a really bad name, and I know that, you know, any designer watching this is probably cringing at this slide and go, oh, system fonts, they're so bad. But it's always worth just like throwing it in there and mentioning like they do exist, they can be used, and sometimes they are an appropriate solution. Hotels.com only uses system fonts, and I know that it's not the most beautiful website, but it's functional, it serves a purpose, and you know, it means that their website is really fast to load. Even, you know, a lot of their users are out and about on mobile connections. It's not worth compromising the speed of loading in order to have a fancy font. So that's something to think about. They're free in every sense of the word. They don't need processing. They don't need data transfer. They don't need data storage in the data center. They're free. That said, you probably do want really, really nice fonts. My image has gone blurry here for some reason. Sorry about that. But just to give you an example, if you are going to use custom fonts on the web, you can really optimize these to a great extent. But if you don't optimize them, they can have a massive burden. So into UI, a really nice open source font. They come by default as TTF files with over 2,000 characters in 39 languages and 9 weights. And each weight of the font is about 300 kilobytes. So if you imagine if you decide to put all 9 weights somehow in your design, 300 kilobytes per weight, that's a huge amount of files. Which is not required though. And I'll show you how firstly, mindful use of typography, you probably don't want 9 weights anyway. But even however many weights you have, even if it's just 1, you can massively reduce the file sizes. So there's a few things you can do. One is that you can actually reduce the amount of characters in, you can convert the file format from TTF to WAF2. So WAF2 is it's a bit like WebP versus JPEG. Nobody would know the difference. All web browsers support it, but the files are a lot smaller. So just going online, find a free conversion tool, just Google for convert TTF to WAF2, and you'll be able to pop the font file in and convert it over. So that's a really easy win. But then you can subset fonts. So you might have noticed that Into UI has 2,192 characters, and the English alphabet has 26. And and then we have numbers, and we have some, you know, we have some punctuation and so on, but we don't have 2,192 characters. Those characters are basically because there's 39 languages and they have all their own different characters. And if your website is only in English or only in French or only in Swahili or whatever it happens to be, you only need that language. So again, there are free tools online where you can go to subset a font, and basically you put in what languages your website is going to be in, and it will strip out all of the characters that are not used in those languages, and you get the file size down massively. So in this InterUI example, we took the file size from 300 kilobytes down to 7 kilobytes, which is a 97.7% reduction in file size. And that's almost nothing. It's almost free. It's almost as good as a system font, but it's beautiful, and that's good for people. But it's also really fast and efficient. Point number 6 is go easy on the icing. So, you know, it's really nice to have, you know, nice transitions and interactive like animations on the web these days. And those things are all great, but they can consume a lot of energy, not just in terms of like the JavaScript, if you're using JavaScript instead of CSS to create those effects, not just in the actual file sizes that have to be transferred, but more importantly on the end user devices that have to like process all that JavaScript when people are interacting. And you might notice some websites that the fans start whirring on your laptop when you're using it, or if you're on your phone, you'll notice your phone gets hot when you're on a website. It's often because of this sort of icing that people have put on that's kind of nice to have, but it's not essential, and actually it can really slow down your device quite significantly, and that's not good user experience. The Safari browser has this nice tool, which not many people know about, and it's not in any other browsers, which is the energy impact tool, which measures the CPU energy on the actual device. So if you see in the middle of the screenshot here, there's the energy impact dial that goes from green to red. And basically what you can do is you can just sort of experiment with different interactive effects on a website. So apply one, try loading the web page and see what the energy impact is, and how, you know, when you remove that effect or try a different effect, how it affects CPU energy. And it's a really nice way of finding that actually some effects look almost the same, but some are just inherently more like computer intensive than others. So it's worth just experimenting, playing around and seeing what has a low impact but still creates that kind of really rich interactive effect that you want. Colors is a really interesting one. So back in the day, a long time ago, when we all had massive cathode ray tube monitors, there was sort of various campaigns to get people to kind of use dark mode or create websites in dark mode to save energy. And then we all switched over to laptops with, or sort of monitors with LCD screens, and it didn't matter anymore because the energy impact of colors on an LCD screen is the same. It doesn't matter what the color is. It's using a constant amount of energy. But now we're moving to OLED technology. On most modern smartphones have OLED screens. A lot of new laptops have OLED screens, most tablets, and increasingly TVs, you know, smart TVs are moving to OLED technology. And so now we're moving actually back, because OLED means that instead of having one big backlight, one big light that covers the whole of the screen, actually what you've got is millions of tiny light bulbs. Every pixel is a tiny, tiny light bulb. And what this means is that white as a color has the highest energy impact, because it means that all the light bulbs are switched on. Black, if your whole screen is black, the whole screen is basically switched off. And then every color in between is sort of somewhere in the, you know, medium energy. But weirdly, blue has Google found when testing this, that blue has a much higher energy impact than green and red pixels. So if you have choice over the color palette, sometimes it's restricted by brand guidelines, but when you have choice, sort of just think carefully about, like, could we move away from like just having like a pure white background, and maybe use a darker color palette, maybe move away from blue. But in particular, I think even if you can't go dark, even if you can't go full dark mode, actually just like try to make a conscious decision to move away from like pure white backgrounds can actually be really good. Even if they're light colored, they'll save energy. They can also be like easier on the eye, better for humans to read than this sort of harsh contrast of like pure white screens with black text. actually, if you had a kind of light gray, light blue, light pink background, Financial Times being a good example, you could save energy and make things easier to read. My next one is just track less. Tracking scripts can have a double negative impact on the environment by being like big files that have to be loaded. There was a nice study done a few years ago about newspaper websites where they found that actually like more than half of the data that's transferred when you load them is tracking script, advertising tracking scripts, and not actually content that you want as a user. But also those tracking scripts are active in the browser. So they're also consuming energy on your device once you've got there. So they're slowing down your device, they're chewing up your battery life, reducing your battery life on your smartphone and your laptop. But they're also just horrible in terms of like, they're just sort of trying to harvest your data and manipulate your mind with customized adverts. So there is a place for tracking. Like there is some data is useful. Some customized advertising may be appropriate, but I think, you know, we just need to be really mindful about this and say like, is it really necessary? Is it really useful? Is it really fair on the user? And if so, you know, okay, you know, then let's use it. But I think there's this obsession with like more data, let's harvest more data is bad for the environment and it's bad for people. And there's obviously a lot of conversation around this these days. And cookie banners like this one are Bluebird Green, which is an environmental website from Bloomberg. But the cookie banner is like, my user experience has been ruined before I've even read anything. It's like, go away. I will now click the back button and go back to Google. So track less. My 9th point, don't drug the user. And I use the word drug unashamedly. You know, increasingly, I mean, particularly social media services are like intentionally designed to be addictive. And I think although most of us are probably not working on things where that's our intention, sometimes there's a gray, you know, there's a blurry line between trying to make a user experience sticky and trying to make user experience addictive. And I think, again, it's about being mindful of that. When we make user experiences addictive, when we like do things like infinite scroll, for example, to keep people on our services, or use notifications in a kind of in a way that is not aligned with the best interests of the user, that's bad for the environment because we're actually making people spend a lot more time online and consume a lot more data. But it can also really be really bad for people's mental health. And obviously this is a big conversation right now, especially as we're all at home spending lots of time online. The last thing we want to do is be sucking people in down a rabbit hole of spending loads of time on services that are not good for them. And actually will serve the user and the environment best by designing services that give them what they need, what they actually really want, what they're looking for, and then let them get out again in a kind of healthy way. And then my last point, which is really kind of tied in with everything that I've covered up until now, is designed for the less privileged. So those of us in the UK, and particularly those of us who work on digital projects, tend to be very privileged in terms of our access to like high-powered devices and fast internet connections. You know, we probably, most of us probably have 4G, 5G, fiber broadband without really worrying about the data limits on it at home. We've probably got relatively new laptops and smartphones, but actually we shouldn't be designing for ourselves. We should be designing for the people who actually have the least powerful devices and who have the least access to data. This site that's on the slide here, what does my site cost, is a great example. It illustrates how much it actually costs on the cheapest plan, which is sort of the best case scenario. On the cheapest plan of either postpaid or prepaid data, mobile data, in loads of different countries. And you can put in a website URL and it will tell you how much it costs to load that page. And so this is like, you know, the amount of data we're loading is an environmental issue, but I think what's really important to highlight here is it's also a social issue, that the poorest people in society are the people who pay the most for data because they have pay-as-you-go plans, or they have, you know, they don't have the unlimited plan or the plan that has like, you know, 10 gigabytes of data bundled in. Like it actually costs them real money, and it's money they don't have. So when they load your website and your autoplay video starts playing and like harvesting data in the background, you're punishing them in a way that they didn't ask for, and they didn't opt into that. So this service is really great. What does my site cost? Well worth a look. You can also you can look at it like in pure like dollar terms, but you can also look at it as like a percentage of income. And I think that's like the graph here is a percentage of income. It's really interesting to look at because actually, you know, in some ways that's what matters, is whether people can afford it or not. But the other side of this about designing for less privilege is also like less powerful devices, because the more we do, I talked about the icing that we put on, like, you know, JavaScript effects with like fancy animations and things, and also the tracking script. They can really take their toll on the actual device processor and make services really, really like painfully slow to use if you've got a slow device. There's a report by a guy called Alex Russell, who's an engineer at Google, and he did one in 2017, and he's recently updated it and released a new update to it now. But he highlights sort of that we should be designing for like basically the median device that is being used by, well, we should be really designing for something worse than the median device. So we shouldn't be designing for the latest iPhone. We shouldn't even be designing for the iPhone that we had like 2 years ago. We should be designing for the device that an average person had 2 years ago, because most people keep their devices for like 3 years. That's the average life of a device globally. So that means the average device is 1.5 years old. We should be looking back, you know, 1.5 years and saying, okay, what did, like, as a best case scenario, what did an average person have 1.5 years ago? But actually, we should be looking kind of at a device worse than that. So he recommends currently that the Motorola Moto E6 is basically the device we should be designing for. It's I haven't used this one personally, but I do have a Motorola that's similarly rubbish. And it's really useful to actually have like a not very good phone, or just use, you know, you can use simulation tools where you can just like set this as your device. You don't have to buy one. You can just use sort of the browser tools and set, you know, Motorola E6 if you can get it, or something similar. But he makes a couple of really powerful statements. One is he says things continue to get better and better for the wealthy, leaving the rest behind. And what he means by that is that the internet is constantly getting faster and devices are constantly getting more powerful. But actually, that's only really true for like the small percentage of people that always have the latest device and always have the fastest internet connection. And actually, globally, the average person has something that's far, far worse than what we, these sort of people who work in digital, generally have. And he says as a recommendation for modern web pages, 0.5 MB is a decent hard budget. Basically, like, you shouldn't be going above about 0.5 MB for a web page. The BBC page that I showed on the previous slide was 4 MB. And that's pretty typical. I think the average web page at the moment is about 2 MB. So we need to like reduce the size of the average page by 75% just to make it a reasonable experience for a typical user. And I think that's a really powerful frame for us to think about. And if we did that, we'd have massive benefits for the environment. And it would mean that not only would like the less privileged users have a good experience or an acceptable experience, it would also mean that those of us who do have the latest devices would have like an insanely good experience. Like, we'd never have to wait for anything to load. It would just be instantaneous. So this is something really powerful, and I think we should be thinking about this kind of this social aspect of this, not just the environmental aspect. And then finally is just my kind of blatant plug of my book that came out a couple of months ago, Sustainable Web Design, where I look at kind of, you know, why we need to be looking at the environmental impact of web projects, the sort of philosophy about how we should be thinking about our web, you know, sustainability within web projects, but then the practical stuff we can do in design, in development, in hosting, the business case, like how do we make the business case to our clients, to our managers, to our colleagues. And then the final chapter is about how will the internet itself be impacted by climate change. And And we heard earlier about, the concept of like we need to be thinking about resilience. And actually, I think that's really important, that as climate change continues, what we're going to see more and more is actually like situations where the internet itself is impacted by climate change. The Australian bushfires, the Australian Fire Service had predicted that that if there was a major bushfire, the Australian broadband network would crap out, was their official terminology. And as soon as these bushfires kicked off, they had all sorts of problems with the internet dropping out. And this is at a time, and also with mobile, problems with mobile systems as well, because the fire causes this sort of plasma that impacts the mobile data being transmitted through the atmosphere. So, and then, hurricanes taking out data centers and so on. The London Docklands is the main hub of data centers in the UK and of the internet connection, and yet it's on a floodplain, and it only doesn't flood because we have this lovely Thames barrier that keeps the water out of our capital city. We have to ask ourselves some serious questions about the longevity of this plan, and the resilience of the systems that we're building, and the fact that like when we need the internet the most is when there is a disaster, is when there is a bushfire or a hurricane, and people need access to information about like, what is going on, are my family safe, how do I get out of this, how do I keep myself safe? And it's in those times that that systems tend to fail. And so actually designing for resilience is also super, super important. That's all I'm going to go through tonight, but hopefully that's been interesting for you guys, and there's some useful things that you can take away.
Thank you so much, Tom. Yeah, it was really, really good, thought-provoking, and yeah, lots of good for yours and all the talks this evening. Lots of good comments coming in on the YouTube chat. I know you can't all probably see those, and some questions coming in as well. So thanks again, Tom. And that leads me on to hopefully everyone else, if Chris and Natalia are around as well still, fingers crossed. We've got some questions. They are like as if by magic. They reappear from, I'm not sure where you are, Natalia.
Sorry, I'm based in Cornwall.
Oh, of course you are. Sorry, you did say that. Cornwall, of course you are. And is it the South Island in New Zealand, Chris?
Yeah, I'm based in the future.
Live from the future.
Live from the future. It could be a good future, we'll say here.
I hope it's... I hope it's better than the current one I'm in right now. Not that this isn't amazing, obviously, right now. So we'll jump into the Q&A. And first question for Natalia is from Christian. And I wonder what are Natalia's thoughts about cryptocurrency, specifically mining and its impact on the environment versus a typical physical currency?
Can I not answer that question?
You cannot answer that. You don't have to answer anything.
Yeah, I don't know as much about it as I probably should to give a solid answer. I might be a bit too opinionated about it, so let me just like keep that aside for the next meetup.
We don't mind opinions, really. Feel free.
The chat's full of opinions, don't trust me. That's fine.
So we have a question from Axel. He'd like to know, what is the impact of changing to a compostable toilet? Not just for Axel, for everybody.
It was more of a I wonder what the impact was rather than specifically for a speaker. So
I do have a composting toilet, so I'm happy to chip in on this one.
Okay.
So we've had one for about 7 years, and we've harvested about 2 tons of food. So that's like high quality topsoil, and the world's topsoil is being depleted at some insane rate. I think the UN predicted that like agricultural land will basically run out of viable topsoil by about 2050. So this is something we really need, and we're flushing it away on a daily basis. And the best thing about a composting toilet is that you get free tomatoes. And I'll leave it to your imagination to figure out how you get them, but it's pretty good.
I think the next one's actually kind of been covered actually on the chat, but it was actually it was talking about composting actually, and it was the trick to composting apparently not to put cooked food in it, which because it attracts rats. But any thoughts on that, if anyone else? But there was some feedback on the chat around that, so that could put in cooked food into compost bins.
I was slightly maybe I'm just a bit too laid back, but we chuck everything in the compost bin, and it's fine.
And you don't have rats?
No, but our neighbours have cats, and I think that may be the answer.
Yeah, they probably eat the food.
I don't think that's much of an issue.
Our green future: rats and poo.
Sounds great.
What can we do to make our politicians take it more seriously? Climate change, I imagine.
That's a great question. I think we need to be a bit more vocal, like all of us as a society, and we do need to, protest what we believe in, be active, be vocal, and vote for the policies that we actually want, because the more votes we're going to get, then they will be treated more seriously, I think.
Yeah, in New Zealand, last year we had an election, and there was a lot of people were choosing their candidates or voting based on green policies and climate change policies. So that's been quite a big push in New Zealand to basically just vote in people based on their policies, and therefore there's more chance that those will get to into the House of Parliament and then get voted on and discussed. So that's been quite a big way that we've done it here.
Question for you, Chris, actually. Bit more generic one. Is there a way to get these posters on a t-shirt?
Yeah.
I bet you've been asked that a few times, I'm sure.
I haven't actually been asked that, no. But it would be quite cool on a t-shirt. So a couple of ways. One is to go to madeactnow.com, choose the poster you like, and when you hover over the poster, there's a couple of options. One will be share via Twitter, via Facebook, or via Instagram, and there should be one that says download poster, with your downloaded PDF, and a PDF is generally the most acceptable format for most things. And then you could put that PDF on a USB, take it to your t-shirt printing shop, or email it to them, whatever's going to have the least carbon footprint, and they will then be able to put it onto the t-shirt. If you need more help, please you can email me. My email address is on the Main Now website, and I'm happy to share files and things like that. Yeah, I'd love a photo of someone gets it on.
Are they under Creative Commons or?
Yes, everything's part of Creative Commons license.
Okay, so that's cool. It actually sparked a bit of conversation on the chat from our local sort of, I guess, community people who regularly attend our real life events, and who seem to be very keen for doing projecting the posters around the city. So that sparked a bit of discussion. I think a few people are actually up for that. So if that's not a problem to use it under Creative Commons, and I think there's a bit of offline chat going to happen around that. So I'm sure we'll be part of it as well. Well, myself as I'm sure. So
if anyone else has the same kind of question, whoever's listening, just get in touch and we can supply everything so it's easy to use. And happy to support that in any way possible. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks. So a question for Tom from Catherine. You talked about ad-driven websites, and her question is, so they kind of ad-driven websites want you to watch the video, click the link. So ad-driven websites aren't going to change, though, are they? Question mark. I mean, I guess the question there is, the subtext is, what can we do to kind of drive change in, whether ad revenue is the source of revenue for that site?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair question, and I think and also to be fair to like the some media outlets, like they're struggling with the transition from like print to digital, and like figuring out what the business model is, and a lot of them are kind of scrabbling around just trying to figure out how to survive. But a really interesting case study recently was the Dutch national broadcaster, which I've forgotten what the Dutch national broadcaster is actually called. but it's their equivalent of the BBC. They run ads to generate revenue on their websites, and they were, using tracking to do personalized adverts, and thinking that this would actually increase their revenue. And then when GDPR came in, they made a decision. That's the NOS. Thanks, Pip. When GDPR came in, they basically explored GDPR, and because they're not British, they decided that they would take it seriously and follow the letter of the law. And they basically thought, well, actually, we can't do all this personalization of the adverts, because it's just going to be too much of a nightmare, getting people to actually agree to what we're actually doing. So they decided that they would take it out, and they built an entirely new ad server for how they serve their ads and how they sell their ads to the advertisers. And what they found, although it was a bit of work to change over that technology behind the scenes, they actually found that they actually ended up making up a lot more money, and it was a lot easier to manage the adverts, the non-personalized adverts, and they didn't have any tracking scripts. So, they'd had tracking scripts for how many people visit the website and so on, but they're not these extra tracking scripts for personalizing the adverts. So I think it's worth challenging whether the personalization of ads and that sort of thing is really actually commercially beneficial, and testing that assumption.
The last question, which kind of did get covered, and I think they sort of, not saying they would want to go down that route, but was bearing in mind, this is from Alex, bearing in mind that encryption is compute intensive, does it mean that HTTPS is actually less green than HTTP?
This is a great question. Probably. I have discussed it with people before. I don't know anybody who definitively knows the answer, but yeah, probably. But I imagine it's fairly microscopic, and I don't know, what choice do we have?
I think they will. The point they got to was, they obviously don't want to be on non-secure. So that was more of just a thought, really. And if it was kind of if it did have an impact.
Yeah, possibly our most niche question of the evening.
I don't know. There was some random stuff popping up. I don't know if we popped in. I think that's actually the questions we got. So just want to say thank you again, really. So thank you for all the questions coming in from the audience, and huge thank you to our speakers for giving up their time and giving up their time to put the talks together and come on I'm going to say come on this evening, but also this morning as well, I guess, over for you there, Chris. So you can go to work now, I guess, or something. So so thank you very much. And again, thank you for the audience, for your questions, and for turning up. We've all got a bit of Zoom fatigue, and we'd obviously much rather be doing this in real life, and hopefully soon. Which does bring us to save the date. Actually, I'm going to go in that order. So we don't know if it's going to be in real life. Obviously, I think we're in. The next one is 24th of June. So put it in your diaries. It may be online, it may be hybrid, but as soon as we know what's going to go on, obviously we'll let you know. We'll see what happens. I just want to say big thanks once again to our sponsors, Guru, Silverstone Technology Park, Pixel Creation, Tito, and Protospace. And just to touch on Protospace, as a lot of you probably still don't know what that's all about. This is a new community-led initiative to bring individuals, businesses, and organizations together to support, connect, and grow the tech community in and around Milton Keynes. It's a collaboration between Pooleyville, one of my hats, Made in MK and MK Geek Night, my other hat, with support from Milton Keynes Council as part of their COVID-19 Economic Recovery Fund. And basically, because of that, this is why we're able to offer free tickets for all of our events this year, because we're supported from them. If you want to find out a bit more information, we started to put together a community calendar. So it's on protospace.uk, and you can also, probably worth subscribing on there, because there's lots more events we're putting together. We've had a few around sustainability as well so far this year. We're going to come on to our next theme soon, but yeah, pop your email in there and you'll get updates. And that's it. Yeah, save the date. Thanks again to everyone. Thanks for joining us, and see you in June, online or in real life. Who knows? Thanks a lot.
Cheers, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.